On what appeared to be a routine arrest, a proud police officer mistakenly targets a black man without realizing his identity. She believes she is showing him his place, but within minutes, the situation takes a dramatic turn. The man she confronts is not just an ordinary citizen, he is her superior. What ensues is a series of events involving exposure, revenge, and consequences. You are about to witness the downfall of an individual who believed her badge made her invincible. The extent to which this story unfolds will surprise you until the very end. Before we begin, please share your location and the time you're listening from. We always appreciate your feedback. The scene was set on a damp and unsettled evening in Seattle, characterized by rain cascading sideways and the wind murmuring secrets along deserted alleys. Officer Karen Blake, with 2 decades of experience, sat in her patrol car, observing the streets through squeaky windshield wipers. Despite her hardened demeanor from years on the force, she sensed an unidentifiable tension in the air that evening. The city exuded scents of wet pavement and old cigarettes, with flickering neon signs and crackling static on the radio. Karen was familiar with the trouble spots, the signs of potential conflict, and the individuals who required a firm hand, as she often mentioned. She thrived on confrontations, which kept her alert and competent, enabling her to navigate through 2 decades of dealing with unruly individuals who believed themselves to be beyond consequences. Unwilling to be pushed around, she never allowed it to happen, not once. Near midnight, she spotted a sleek, black, brand-new Tesla Model S silently gliding through the mist as if it owned the road. The car made a slow, wide turn into the marina lot without signaling, with no one else in sight. The streets were eerily quiet except for the distant sound of tires on wet pavement and a cargo ship making its way through Elliott Bay. Something about the car struck Karen as out of place at that hour and in that part of town. She activated her cruiser's lights, casting red and blue flashes in the rain, and approached the Tesla as it came to a deliberate halt under a buzzing street lamp. The marina lot was deserted, with only a chain-link fence, some abandoned boats, and a dingy bait shop covered in grime. Karen stepped out into a shallow puddle, boots splashing as she adjusted her belt and rested a hand near her holster. As she neared the driver's side window, it slid down noiselessly. The man inside, a black man in his mid-40s, was clean-shaven with sharp features and unwavering eyes. He was dressed in a tailored charcoal overcoat, silk scarf, and what seemed to be cufflinks. Addressing him firmly, Karen demanded, "License and registration." The man, composed and unruffled, asked politely, "May I inquire why I am being pulled over, officer?" His controlled, polished tone conveyed neither defiance nor submission, but a sense of accustomed importance. Karen stiffened when the man failed to signal at the last turn, not seeing her badge as a threat. She noticed he didn't seem fazed by her tone or how composed he appeared, unlike most people who would stammer and sweat in such situations. When she repeated her request for license and registration more sharply, he finally reached towards the glove box slowly, as if he had rehearsed the motion. Karen's fingers twitched near her radio as her heart beat a bit faster, having been through enough stops to know that the quiet ones could be the most unpredictable. As he handed over the documents, Karen briefly glanced at the name Desmond Carter, but it didn't register. When she asked him if he lived around the area in a clipped tone, he stated that it was not relevant to the stop, his eyes steady. Karen felt that something was off, from the car to his clothes to the way he spoke, and it made her uneasy. After she asked him to step out of the vehicle and he questioned if it was necessary, he complied without further protest, stepping out of the car. He appeared taller and broader than she had expected, exuding a sense of power. As Karen gestured towards the trunk and he obeyed, placing his palms on the cold metal, the rain started to intensify, adding a sense of tension to the situation. She placed her hand on his back firmly, guiding him, and sensed the resistance in his stance. He wasn't resisting, but wasn't yielding either. In that moment, something snapped. She didn't hesitate or ponder. Her fist flew and landed on his jaw with a sharp, wet crack that reverberated across the marina. He staggered but didn't fall, blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. Karen, standing over him, breathed heavily, heart racing with adrenaline. She anticipated him to retaliate or curse at her. However, he slowly turned, meeting her gaze with a cold, ancient steel look. "You'll regret that, officer," he murmured softly, not as a threat or plea, but as a statement. Karen returned his ID to the driver's seat. "Get back in your car," she muttered. Desmond wiped his bloodied lip, got into the car, and drove off without a word. The fading taillights disappeared into the mist, engulfed by the fog, leaving her alone in the fishy-smelling diesel-infused lot. Her hand still tingled. She convinced herself she had put him in his place, teaching him not to talk back. Yet deep down, a sense of doubt crept in. The look in his eyes was not of fear, but of certainty about what was to come next. Karen got back into her cruiser, shut the door, and cranked up the heat. Her knuckles throbbed, chest constricted, and amidst the radio static and engine hum, a voice inside whispered, "You made the wrong move tonight." Morning arrived like a lingering hangover. Skies were overcast with dense clouds. A continuous light rain and a blanket of fog enveloped every window at the police station. Officer Karen Blake eased into her usual seat, holding a chipped mug of cold coffee, her knuckles sore from the previous night's events. In her mind, the arrest had been forceful but necessary, a reminder of how law enforcement should be assertive. Nowadays, people were too focused on procedures, forgetting the essence of true policing. Content, she leaned back, letting the bitter warmth of the coffee calm her nerves. As the morning crew trickled in, Karen observed their routine without anyone prying into her night, preferring the air of quiet authority. Suddenly, the dispatcher's voice disrupted the tranquility, summoning her to the chief's office, a puzzling request since Chief Healer had retired, replaced by an unfamiliar interim administrator. Though likely just a routine matter, a sense of unease gnawed at her gut. Straightening her posture, Karen headed down the familiar corridor, past commendation plaques and old missing posters, towards the frosted glass door labeled Chief. Without waiting, she pushed the door open and froze as her eyes met the gaze of a man in a sharp charcoal suit and a white shirt, an unsettling feeling settling in her stomach. Desmond Carter had an emerging bruise on his jawline where her fist had landed less than 12 hours ago. Karen Blake's breath caught in her chest as she realized it was him, the man from the Tesla, the man she had accidentally hit and who was now her boss. Without a smile or a word, he simply stared at her, causing the ground to feel unsteady beneath her feet. This was the first time in a long while that Karen felt the air thinning around her. When she finally spoke, it was an automatic response. "Chief Carter, I didn't know. I thought you were just..." Chief Carter interrupted her with a calm and authoritative gesture, signaling her to stop speaking. "You're on desk duty until further notice," he informed her in a smooth but firm tone. There was no shouting or reprimanding, just a clear decision. Without waiting for a reply, he returned his attention to the file on his desk, as if Karen had already left the room. Feeling frozen, Karen stood there waiting for some further reaction, but none came. Eventually, with stiffness in her movements, she turned and left the room, the door clicking shut behind her. Back in the office, everything seemed the same. The buzzing lights, the ringing phones, yet everything had shifted for her. Sitting down at her desk, she noticed her once warm coffee had turned cold, and her heart was beating rapidly in her chest. Her rookie partner Torres leaned over wide-eyed and whispered in awe, "That was him, the guy from last night." Karen nodded tensely, her jaw clenched. Torres let out a low whistle and remarked, "Damn, you hit the boss." Voices rustled, heads swiveled, and hushed murmurs spread like sparks in the air. She sensed the weight of numerous sidelong glances brushing against her back, some with smirks, others with indifference. Karen strained to offer a smile, nonchalantly shrugged, thinking to herself that he would eventually move on. However, her own words tasted insincere and forced. Her hand trembled slightly as she pretended to jot down notes on a report. She reassured herself that this was just a minor setback. Sitting at her desk wasn't a suspension. She still possessed her badge, gun, and pension. Yet, deep inside, she felt a shift had occurred. Desmond Carter hadn't yelled, demanded an apology, or even raised his voice. His silent dismissal spoke volumes. It hinted that he wasn't done, suggesting that the true repercussions had not even begun. She convinced herself that it didn't matter, that it would blow over, dismissing it as an exaggerated reaction in a society easily offended. Though desk duty wasn't catastrophic, nor was it a formal probe or suspension, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that something had fractured, and it wasn't just the bruise on Desmond Carter's face. Despite her attempts to maintain her usual confident demeanor, head held high, shoulders back, enveloped in her daily routine, doubt crept in. The atmosphere in the precinct now felt dense, with interactions feeling strained. Some avoided making eye contact, while others offered awkward nods, uncertain if she was still part of their group. Torres, her inexperienced partner, barely exchanged a couple of words throughout their shift, absorbed in typing, stealing furtive glances. Karen sat at her desk, fingers dancing on the keyboard. She was engrossed in her reports, indifferent to the passing minutes as she sat amidst paperwork and hushed conversations. The chief's expression changed when she confronted him. A passing officer, Jenkins, made an indistinct comment under his breath which she could not make out, but his smirk conveyed enough. During lunchtime in the break room, she sat isolated, eating a tasteless sandwich, while the usual lively atmosphere of shared stories and jokes amongst colleagues was notably absent, leaving her feeling like an outcast. Upon returning to work, she received a notification in her inbox which she expected to be routine records-related tasks, but turned out to be a warning about social media monitoring regarding a flagged video depicting the moment she struck Desmond, the new police chief, as captured in cell phone footage that had gone viral with damaging implications. The video, featuring her assaulting the chief, had garnered a massive 200,000 views, with harsh commentary labeling her actions as a failure to protect the community. The realization of her public embarrassment made her tremble as she faced the backlash online and sensed the mounting pressure closing in on her in the workplace. Overwhelmed, she abruptly left her seat, heart pounding and throat dry, feeling the weight of judgment from her peers. As she passed by, she hurriedly entered the locker room and forcefully pulled open the door, relieved to find it empty. Seated on the bench, she placed her hands on her knees, breathing in short gasps. This outcome was not what she had expected. Despite being an experienced, decorated, and respected veteran who had trained rookies and handled various challenges, she now found herself sidelined, publicly embarrassed, and facing uncertainty. To her dismay, Desmond had remained silent, offering no public statements, press conferences, or internal complaints. This silence indicated that he was biding his time, strategizing his next move. Karen, who had always been in control and made critical decisions, now felt like a mere pawn in someone else's game. Aware of Desmond's composed nature and calculated approach, she feared his methodical dismantling rather than an explosive reaction. Despite reassuring herself that he would eventually move on to avoid negative publicity, her instincts and racing heart contradicted her hope. Returning home that rainy night to a dark and quiet house, she shed her uniform and stood before the bathroom mirror, confronting her tired and defeated reflection. She confessed aloud that her phone vibrated with a message from her sister in Spokane. "Is it true that you attacked the chief? What is going on, Karen?" She remained silent. What could she possibly say? Admit that she didn't know, that she mistook him for just another man in a fancy car who looked at her the wrong way and unleashed something ugly within her? In frustration, she threw the phone across the counter. It came to a halt next to a toothbrush and an old bottle of Tylenol. After washing her face and looking up, she saw the same eyes, the familiar lines on her skin, the same stubbornly proud jawline. However, the woman in the mirror was no longer invincible. She was not in control. Deep down, in the hidden part of her soul, she acknowledged that Desmond Carter had only just begun. The internet never sleeps, never pauses to inquire, nor waits for explanations. By the time Karen Blake poured her second cup of coffee the following morning, The video had already spread like wildfire. The sharp, unmistakable punch she delivered to Desmond Carter's jaw was being looped repeatedly on various platforms: TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. News outlets picked it up with headlines blaring in bold red letters. Seattle officer assaults black man. Turns out he's her boss. Her name was trending, but not in the usual manner after a major bust or community recognition. Now, it was associated with words like racist, violent, and unfit. Before noon, the sound of her fist landing on Desmond Carter's jaw had been replayed over 2 million times. Comment sections flooded with anger, outrage, and demands for her immediate termination. To make matters worse, individuals began delving into her past. Internet investigators uncovered old arrest records, archived footage, anything linked to her badge number. Several grainy videos capturing past arguments on sidewalks with aggressive interactions were edited and taken out of context, presenting her in a brutal light she didn't recognize within herself or perhaps did not want to acknowledge. By lunchtime, protesters had gathered outside the precinct, starting with a few voices and signs that quickly escalated into a clamor for justice for Desmond reverberating against the brick facade. Among the shouts, a sign was held up with a still image from the video, freezing her mid-swing, telling its own tale. Inside the precinct, tension permeated, with closed windows and officers keeping low profiles, even the captain mostly staying in his office. Karen moved through the halls quietly, feeling every step too loud and every glance laden with judgment or pity. Struggling to maintain control, she felt it slipping away as her shift ended, greeted by news vans and reporters calling her name as she left the building, her head down, absorbing every word. That evening, sitting on her bed, she watched the footage repeatedly on TV, analyzing her own expression, the clenched jaw, the steely gaze, the moment before her outburst. Realizing she appeared not in control but rather angry, defensive, and threatened by a man who had not even raised his voice or crossed a line. This understanding crept over her like a slow sickness, accompanied by a message on her phone from an old academy comrade. "It's bad. I can assure you they won't allow you to escape this." She remained silent, then received another message, this time from her daughter. It contained just one word: why? Karen gazed at the screen with a tight throat, lacking a response. The following day, the protest had grown threefold, with people chanting her name like a curse, demanding Blake's departure, insisting on justice and peace. Paint was flung onto the precinct steps, officers avoiding it as if it were blood. She was reassigned once more, this time to a dim back office with a corner desk, a broken chair, and a loud ticking wall clock, but no computer or access to reports. When she asked the lieutenant for an explanation, he merely mentioned orders, making her realize that Desmond hadn't forgotten, biding his time while she felt powerless. By midday, her union representative contacted her, sounding anxious, mentioning pressure from higher-ups, the mayor's office, and civil rights groups. When she inquired about a potential suspension, he hesitated, indicating there were numerous considerations being pondered. Without another word, she ended the call. Returning to her desk, she opened her email, noticing a subject line that demanded attention, a request for public comment on Officer Blake's behavior. Attached was a formal statement from the Police Oversight Committee, reviewing the incident and addressing allegations of excessive force, racially biased actions, and wider departmental implications. As she read, the words felt unreal until a knock on the glass startled her. It was Torres, standing at the door without entering. He shifted uncomfortably and muttered, "I've been reassigned. They partnered me with Jenkins. It's all about the image," looking over at Karen for a reaction. However, she stayed silent. After a moment of hesitation, he added, "For what it's worth, I never expected it to escalate this far." Karen gave him a cold, indifferent look, and he left that afternoon. Meanwhile, she tried calling her daughter several times but got no response. Leaving a voicemail, she pleaded, "Sweetheart, I understand how it may seem, but there's more to the situation than what people are saying. Please call me back." Her voice broke at the end, revealing her deep distress. As the day progressed, the demonstrators outside grew louder, chanting for Desmond to resign. Yet he remained silent, employing a strategic move that left Karen feeling abandoned and defenseless. By evening, the precinct steps were splattered with red paint, and a sign demanding accountability was taped to the glass. Sitting in her car, Karen reminisced about the city she once protected and felt part of. But now she struggled to recognize herself, especially when gazing at her hands. Once proudly holding a badge, now feeling foreign, almost like incriminating. Evidence. On a Thursday, a plain envelope arrived in her mailbox, bearing her name in bold print, Officer Karen Blake. Recognizing its contents before she even opened it, she momentarily hesitated before tearing the notice open swiftly, revealing an announcement of an internal investigation from the department, marked with the seal at the top. The formal language stated that an inquiry into her conduct had commenced immediately. Reading it through once and then again, by the time she finished, her hands trembled. It was evident that this was not solely about the incident anymore. The scope seemed wider, delving into the precinct's operations. Although no one explicitly mentioned it, the way others regarded her conveyed the message. Conversations halted, gazes lingered as she passed, hinting at an underlying narrative. The Oversight Committee had demanded access to her past disciplinary records, body camera footage, and previous complaints, laying bare her entire career for scrutiny. While Desmond remained publicly silent, his influence was palpable throughout the investigation process. The formality and pace of the inquiry indicated its seriousness and efficiency. The initial formal interrogation occurred in a dimly lit room, with Captain Marcy Leland from Internal Affairs seated across from her. Known for her meticulousness and intolerance for frivolity. Having collaborated on cases with Leland before, Karen was well aware of her demeanor, distant and assertive, often asserting her intellectual superiority in any room. Leland asked Karen to recount the events of the night without any introduction. Karen leaned in, placing her arms on the table, and began explaining a traffic stop she conducted where the driver was Desmond Carter. Leland interrupted by opening a file, revealing that Desmond Carter was the police chief. Karen's jaw clenched as she revealed that she was not aware of his identity when she detained him. Leland pointed out that she had hit the chief, leaving Karen no room to evade the truth. Karen hesitated as she admitted that Desmond Carter was uncooperative, albeit not threatening or reaching for a weapon. Angrily, she clarified that he did not raise his voice or make any aggressive moves. Leland paused, jotted something down, and Karen sat back, feeling the weight of the unfolding situation. As accusations piled up against her, Leland brought up complaints from 3 young black men in 2019 that were left uninvestigated. One of the complaints involved physical aggression during a stop with a teenager named Marcus Doyle, which Karen struggled to recall among the numerous incidents she had encountered. Feeling a sense of betrayal, Karen realized that someone was trying to tarnish her reputation as additional signed affidavits were presented to her. Overwhelmed, Karen suggested that it might be a setup orchestrated by the police chief, but Leland remained silent, leaving Karen to contemplate her next move. Karen's flat voice expressed her inquiry, receiving no response. However, she pondered those exact thoughts herself. The situation seemed to be progressing too swiftly, too smoothly, too perfectly timed, as if someone had calculated the right moment to strike. Now wounded and vulnerable in the public eye, it seemed like someone was finishing her off. Despite her attempts to resist, seeking support from her union representative, lodging complaints, and striving for a formal defense, nothing seemed to stick. Then, the news arrived, impossible to evade. A 60-day suspension without pay, pending further investigation. Holding the paper in her hands, it felt as if it was penned in an unfamiliar language. No matter her accomplished arrests, closed cases, or the times she had safeguarded the public from danger, those achievements held no value anymore. The focus now shifted to that singular act, the punch, that fleeting moment, Desmond Carter's face. With seemingly minimal effort, her reputation was tarnished, and she found herself drowning in despair. As she cleared out her belongings from the deserted locker room, a disheartening sight stopped her in her tracks. Boldly painted in crimson inside her locker were 3 words: "Racist pig trash." The still wet letters oozing down. The acrid scent of spray paint lingered in the air, but she saw no culprit, just the accusatory message glaring back at her. Without shedding a tear or letting out a cry, she removed her badge, placing it resignedly on the bench before sinking into a seat. The foundation she had meticulously constructed, her career, the respect, the authority, were crumbling before her eyes. Recollections of her first day donning the uniform, the weight of the protective vest, the gleam of her polished boots, and the pride she once felt now seemed like distant memories. Instead of confidence, a sense of hollowness engulfed her. Beside her, her phone buzzed, signaling a message from her daughter, containing only a single sentence. "Informing my friends that you no longer work there was particularly painful." The words lingered before her eyes until they became blurry. Subsequently, she rose, gathered her equipment, and departed through the back exit of the precinct without bidding farewell. Though the rain had ceased outside, the atmosphere remained heavy, and the streets retained a slick feel. Uncertain of what lay ahead and how far the situation would escalate, she was certain of one thing: Desmond Carter wasn't finished. She had believed the worst was over with the 60-day suspension, hoping to eventually regain her footing if she kept a low profile. However, Karen Blake's optimism was shattered as the betrayal originated not from external sources, but from within the precinct walls, from someone who had once been her partner, Dean Wallace. After 17 years of shared patrols, bar altercations, foot pursuits, and late-night shifts where they relied on each other amidst chaos and trusted each other's judgment for survival, he was now revealing everything to internal affairs, unbeknownst to her. Learning of Wallace's actions not through the department but from Torres, a rookie who anxiously approached her outside the precinct, warning her of the impending storm. Wallace had provided a statement about her, disclosing events from years past, insinuating a shared history. Questioning Torres about this revelation, she already knew the answer, although Torres evaded her gaze and remained silent. The wind cut through her jacket as she stood frozen, feeling a cold weight settling in her gut, heavy and familiar like shame. Later that day, her union representative confirmed that Wallace had provided information not only about the Desmond incident, but also about other incidents, mentioning times when Karen unnecessarily escalated situations, used excessive force, or used words that could be misinterpreted. She felt the urge to throw something at the word misconstrued. Wallace, who had been present during those incidents by her side, had never spoken up, never questioned her decisions. Now, when the situation was changing, he was trying to wash his hands off the blame, just like a washcloth. When she called him, he didn't pick up and didn't respond to her messages. The next morning, he appeared on the news outside the precinct, looking uncomfortable but prepared, stating, "I think it's important to admit mistakes when they occur. This is not about a single incident, but a recurring pattern that we overlooked for too long." Karen watched in disbelief from her living room as he portrayed her as the face of every mistake the department had swept under the rug, and people believed him because once a narrative is established online, it becomes truth. The headlines changed, with new testimonies from fellow officers confirming a pattern of abuse within the department. Karen felt the urge to shout, to reveal how many times she had covered for Wallace when he was intoxicated or neglected his duties. But she knew it wouldn't make a difference now. The story had been framed, and she was portrayed as the antagonist. A week into her suspension, she was officially banned from the precinct. Even her colleagues stopped responding to her texts, leaving her in silence. Karen sat alone in her apartment, feeling the videos wrap around her like a tight grip. She watched not only the marina footage, but also other old clips she had forgotten about. The videos had been clipped, edited, and uploaded, each one scrutinized by commentators and armchair experts. What hurt the most was realizing that some of it was not distorted, some of it was real. She recalled instances where she had raised her voice, grabbed someone's arm too tightly, and treated people as threats before they even became problems. Looking at it now through the lens of being watched, she saw how different it all seemed. It had just been another ordinary Tuesday back then. By the second week, she found herself unable to sleep. Sweating and dreaming of banging cell doors haunted her nights, with the sound of people chanting her name outside her window. Her daughter had not contacted her, and her sister had left a voicemail asking for time to think. The city was moving forward, with Desmond Carter returning to work and introducing new department guidelines emphasizing accountability, culture shift, and reform. These buzzwords, though sounding progressive, felt heavy and punishing to those they targeted. Karen's name was no longer circulating in the news, yet she still felt suffocated. The final blow came in a letter from the review board, buried in clinical language, mentioning the possibility of termination based on new findings during the suspension period. The word termination, prominently emphasized, lingered in her thoughts for hours as she reflected on the sacrifices she had made for her job. Pouring one drink after another, she contemplated the nights spent working tirelessly, the missed Christmases, the lost friendships, and the years dedicated to her badge, realizing that none of it seemed to matter anymore. Seated on the floor of her kitchen, she allowed herself to cry for the first time in a while. The tears were not dramatic or noisy, but rather a silent and profound release. Later that evening, she made her way to the precinct a few blocks away, avoiding the main entrance and opting for the alley at the back. Standing across the street, she watched as officers moved about inside, feeling disconnected from them like a stranger. It was then that she noticed a message scrawled in bold black spray paint near the back exit. Y-O-R-E. Though not intended for her, it resonated deeply with Karen, making her realize that this was not just about a single incident, but a larger reckoning she couldn't escape from. Time seemed to blur together for Karen after the initial 3 weeks of suspension, with monotonous routines and a sense of isolation enveloping her. The outside world had moved on to new scandals and trending topics, but for Karen, the silence and neglect felt even more suffocating. Stripped of her badge, weapon, and identity within the department, she existed on the fringes, forgotten and left to deteriorate in obscurity. One morning, the woman decided to drive to the beach in the city merely for a change of scenery. For 2 hours, she observed people jogging, walking their dogs, and pushing strollers without acknowledging her presence. Despite feeling unnoticed, she sensed a lingering impact, as if a haunting video of her existence played out around her. The woman eventually moved to a waterfront bench, where the chilly air and salty breeze stirred feelings of remorse. A passing woman's gaze triggered an unsettling mix of recognition rather than judgment, causing a sinking feeling in Karen's stomach. That night, she took drastic measures, deleting her social media apps, blocking her name from search engines. Yet she still battled haunting voices in the early hours. Memories of past events replayed in her mind, from confrontations to the unexpected repercussions she faced in response. Financial struggles added to her woes as job applications yielded no responses due to her tainted background as a suspended officer. Even the grocery store clerk avoided her gaze, leaving her feeling isolated. Reaching out to her daughter proved futile, her calls unanswered. The only person who remained in touch was Jake, a rookie she had mentored, appreciating his sincerity and nervous demeanor. When faced with aggressive screaming, knowing when to establish boundaries is important. He became her only connection to a world that had rejected her. They rendezvoused at a cafe on 3 Street, a worn-down place with peeling vinyl booths and stale coffee. Seated opposite her in a faded football hoodie, his eyes kept shifting between her and the entrance. With a soft voice, he inquired, "Are you all right?" Karen grinned, masking her pain, and asked, "Do I appear fine?" Without responding, he restlessly toyed with a napkin dispenser. "Jake, I need your support. These accusations are baseless. "You know who I truly am," she pleaded. After a moment of contemplation, he reluctantly agreed. "I'll vouch for you." Karen breathed a sigh of relief, feeling a weight lifted off her shoulders. "We won't let this situation defeat us," she asserted, determined to confront Desmond with the truth and demand a review of her suspension. She refused to let him ruin her hard-earned reputation. Although Jake seemed hesitant, Karen was undeterred by any possible doubt or fear in his eyes. She craved progress, a path forward, any opportunity to break through the barriers. That night, she slept slightly better, envisioning herself returning to the station with pride, her uniform impeccable, ready to show everyone her resilience. The next morning, accompanied by Jake, she braced herself and walked into the chief's office, determined to face Desmond head-on. Karen approached the desk with a sharp posture, looking relaxed as if she had anticipated the encounter. Without waiting for permission, she retracted the suspension firmly, asserting that the complaints were false and that she had evidence to support her claim. Turning to Jake, who hesitated before responding and then shifted slowly, Karen confronted him for recording her. Desmond, seated comfortably, smiled and retrieved a recorder, playing back Karen's own words, criticizing those who believed they owned the city. Jake, without meeting her gaze, acknowledged that he had acted in favor of the department and his career. Feeling betrayed, Karen left the office with clenched hands, retreating to her car where she unleashed her frustration through screams until her voice grew hoarse. As she sat alone in the silence, she realized that the trust she had held onto had shattered completely. The first sound she heard was the distant sirens, signaling an impending danger. Driving home, Karen noticed thick black smoke billowing menacingly near the freeway overpass. Initially dismissing it as another fire in the bustling city, she soon received texts confirming it was something more serious. Upon receiving a message from her former colleague and another from an unknown number inquiring if she had committed a certain act, she pulled over abruptly, her hands clenched tightly on the steering wheel, turning her knuckles white. As she anxiously pondered what they were referring to, a news alert flashed on her phone screen reporting a fire at a community center in South Seattle with suspicions of arson. She scrolled down to find officials examining footage that potentially showed a former police officer near the scene, causing her heart to plummet. Without having to search far, she stumbled upon a still frame circulating on social media, depicting someone resembling herself with a hood on, walking away from the community center down a side alley just moments before the fire erupted. Realizing the alley was a route she frequently traversed during late-night patrols and had recently parked nearby for contemplation, it felt like a noose tightening around her. Instead of attempting to contact Jake again after reaching his voicemail, she accelerated towards a diner on 3 Yard Street, a place that brought a sense of nostalgia. Seated in a corner, she made no order, just sat in silence as the TV above the counter broadcasted the local news coverage of the fire, firefighters battling the blaze, and community figures addressing the tragedy with palpable grief. The news anchor's tone remained detached as they linked the woman in the footage to Karen Blake, the officer entangled in the recent controversy with Police Chief Desmond Carter, seamlessly weaving her past suspension with the current arson investigation, painting her as a convenient scapegoat. With a heavy heart, Karen departed from the diner. Upon returning home without paying any attention to them, nobody interfered with her. Once she arrived, she was met by the press, consisting of 2 vans, 1 cameraman, and 1 reporter exuding fake concern with impeccable makeup. They bombarded her with questions about starting the fire, Officer Blake's involvement, and the potential motives. She chose not to respond, proceeding up the stairs to her apartment door, promptly securing it with the deadbolt. Inside, she found herself standing in the center of the room, gazing into empty space. Gradually, she burst into laughter, initially low and then escalating, not due to amusement, but because the situation seemed unbelievably absurd. The orchestrated series of events, starting from her suspension, followed by betrayal, leading up to the criminal setup, was becoming evident. She sensed a malevolent force orchestrating everything discreetly and meticulously, although she had no concrete evidence, merely her gut feeling. Seeking legal advice, she contacted her lawyer, Kessler, a somewhat competent individual known for representing law enforcement officers in cases involving driving under the influence. Without formalities, she immediately told him about the elaborate scheme and her suspicion that Desmond was behind it, citing the suspiciously perfect timing and her previous proximity to the site of the incident. Kessler, acknowledging her concerns, focused on the urgency of the situation, emphasizing the importance of the incriminating footage and the absence of allies stepping forward to support her. Determined to challenge the fabricated narrative, she expressed her intention to provide a comprehensive statement and set the ball rolling early the next day. Her image saturated the city's screens, with some clamoring for her arrest and others dubbing her a menace. She had transitioned from being viewed as a corrupt police officer to being perceived as a genuine danger. Later that day, she found herself in Kessler's office, an environment adorned with wooden paneling and featuring a malfunctioning fan, the air heavy and warm. "We are requesting a press injunction this week," he mentioned, "and we will insist on receiving the complete surveillance footage. If the footage indicates your departure before the fire started, it might be beneficial, but it won't undo the harm." Karen remained silent, engrossed in scrutinizing a hard copy of a blurry image resembling her silhouette and attire. Although not an exact match, it was suggestive enough. That evening, she returned home with a police car stationed discreetly a short distance away. They were no longer concealing their monitoring efforts, justifying it under the guise of safety precautions. Desmond, still maintaining a public silence, lingered like an intangible, omnipresent fog. Karen found herself unable to sleep, seated on her sofa, fixating on the vacant wall where her accolades once hung. They were now stowed away along with the uniform she used to don as her shield. The arson incident signified more than just physical destruction. It held a deeper symbolic implication. The deliberate act of setting ablaze a facility dedicated to youth programs and placing her in close proximity to the aftermath conveyed a clear message of retaliation. By the week's end, Kessler summoned her again, delivering news of obtaining the entire footage. "It exhibits that you were a considerable distance from the fire's origin when it ignited." Karen acknowledged his words, devoid of any elation or solace, as the damage had already been done. The image had spread, planting doubt in people's minds, and most would not bother waiting for a correction. The media rarely retracted stories once the false narrative had gained traction. Leaving his office, Karen stepped outside into a light drizzle, pulling her hood up and keeping a low profile. Then she noticed it across the street. Parked on the street, Desmond's car seemed empty at first to Karen. However, a movement inside caught her attention. As she peered in, she saw him seated, watching her with a smile. He made no sound or gesture, just his presence. Karen was frozen, realizing this was his way of conveying that he wasn't done yet, and she doubted he ever would be. Karen, who used to exude confidence even in her off-duty walks, now felt out of place. Every sidewalk felt dangerous, and every passerby seemed to hold a secret she was not privy to. Her posture changed, and she became jumpy at the sound of loud noises. Karen's nights were sleepless, haunted by recurring dreams of fire and sirens, with Desmond in the background silently watching. However, a shift occurred within her. She was no longer waiting to be rescued or seeking justice. Instead, she was prepared to retaliate by burning his life down before he could destroy hers. "It all began with a call to Kessler," she stated wearily. "I need you to investigate deeply into his background, his history, especially during his time as deputy chief in Oakland. There's something hidden that he paid to conceal. I can sense it." Kessler hesitated, cautioning Karen about the consequences of pursuing this path. "Karen, this could lead us down an irreversible road. I'm in too deep already," he warned. "I just want to take him down with me," she responded resolutely. The following day, Kessler presented her with information on a bribery scandal from a decade ago involving Desmond. Though the case was quietly closed with no charges, it had murky ties to a vanished drug operation. While concrete evidence was lacking, there were enough suspicions to suggest wrongdoing. Karen pored over the file meticulously, reading every detail twice before she made her decision. Louise Marcato, a freelance reporter known for covering controversial stories, had a meeting with a woman in a seedy bar on Bay Street. The bar was filled with loud music and cheap drinks, attracting those unconcerned with their reputation. The woman slid a file across the table stating that everything inside was authentic and advising to publish it quickly. Louise carefully examined the file, questioning if the woman was certain about releasing the information, as once it's out, it can't be taken back. The woman, named Karen, expressed her desire for the truth to be revealed. After the story was published online the following day, linking the Seattle police chief to a corruption scandal in Oakland, it gained rapid attention on social media. The public scrutiny shifted from Karen to Desmond Carter, unearthing incriminating evidence against him. Karen felt a sense of relief amidst the chaos, knowing she had exposed the truth. The mayor's office announcement of Chief Desmond Carter being placed on leave for an independent review brought laughter to Karen as she realized the impact of her actions. She celebrated in her apartment, watching the news unfold with a bottle of whiskey in hand, seeing the headlines about Carter's leave and the validation of former Officer Blake's claims. Kessler phoned to request her job and everything taken from her, then casually mentioned to wait 24 hours for a call. Indeed, a formal review board hearing was arranged quickly. Karen observed silently as chaos erupted, protests arising against him outside City Hall rather than against her. She found the unexpected shift unsettling. She had been portrayed as the villain for weeks, but now she was seen as a type of survivor, a reluctant emblem of internal corruption. Uncomfortable with being a martyr, she simply sought justice. One night, a blocked number texted her phone. Hesitantly, she answered, only to hear Desmond's chilling voice without any formal introduction, implying that the situation was not over. He claimed to have exposed her and taunted her about her vulnerability. Terrified, she rushed home and discovered her apartment in disarray, a threatening note left behind. Realizing the escalating danger, she watched a patrol car pass by in silence, understanding that the fight was far from over. That evening, she checked into a budget motel off the highway, not a luxurious place, just a secure room with an intact lock. She opted to sleep with the lights on and her gun beneath the pillow. The following morning, a distressing message from Kessler woke her up. "Call me now." Upon contacting him, he delivered the shocking news of Louise's death, caused by a car explosion attributed to a mechanical fault. This revelation hit her hard as he was supposed to discuss their next story regarding Desmond's benefactors that day. Overwhelmed by this loss of another voice, she contemplated her options. She could vanish, leaving everything behind, hoping to avoid further harm, or she could confront the source of all the troubles. Retrieving her gun from the drawer, she pondered her next move. She ultimately decided to finish what she had started. The fires, the setup, the threats, all linked to one individual. Driving to the police station, she parked nearby and observed Desmond's silver SUV already present. Patiently, she trailed him through the city until he entered an underground parking lot attached to a municipal building. Watching from a distance, she stealthily ascended the stairs and positioned herself outside his office. Without knocking, she entered, catching Desmond by surprise. Maintaining his composure, he addressed her calmly, claiming it was a misunderstanding. Dismissing his defense, she declared that framing her was the true error. Brandishing her phone equipped with a recording camera, she warned him that everything he uttered would be broadcast live. Unfazed, he challenged her, prompting her to demand a confession regarding his knowledge. In complete silence, he calmly revealed, "I set you up, made the call, and orchestrated everything against you." Every action she took, he was already ahead by 5 steps. She remained unfazed, not even a smile, as the red light on her phone blinked. Across the city, people were already watching, and finally, she had him. The confession went viral even before sunrise. By 6 a.m., the video had gathered 3 million views. Karen Blake sat in a hospital bed, wounded but content. Desmond Carter's blunt confession had been broadcast live, exposing his role in ruining her life. The world was now aware of his deeds. The live stream had captured the pivotal moment when the SWAT team intervened, but it still provided enough evidence. Awakening in the emergency room, she was told, "You're trending." Shortly after, Carter resigned, disappearing from the public eye within 12 hours. Despite her successful act of standing up and surviving, Karen was arrested for various serious offenses such as kidnapping, brandishing a weapon, reckless endangerment, and assault. The city couldn't reward her for her actions as she had taken justice into her own hands, holding a gun to someone's head and making threats on camera. Though her actions achieved results, they came at a high cost, leaving her with no chance of being reinstated, no badge, pension, or apology. Instead, she faced a future filled with painkillers, paperwork, and a cold courtroom where a judge regarded her with a mix of pity and reproach. However, as videos showcasing her bravery and the incidents she endured circulated, public opinion towards her started to shift. No longer seen as a hero or a villain, she became known as the woman who stood up and survived. During her sentencing, Karen chose not to give a long speech, but simply expressed, "I did what I had to do, and I don't regret a damn thing." The judge's decision of time served 5 years of probation, and no prison time felt like a lenient yet cautionary outcome. Avoiding the reporters and camera flashes, Karen left the courthouse discreetly and headed to her sister Ellen's house on the outskirts of the city. Ellen, who had also been a victim of the same injustice, welcomed Karen in with a silent understanding, offering her comfort and support without the need for words after her long and turbulent ordeal. After spending weeks in bed, she experienced a sudden collapse that led to a 17-hour sleep. Upon awakening, she noticed the sun peeking through the window and realized that, for the first time in months, there were no sirens echoing in her mind. Despite the absence of her badge, Karen found it challenging to let go of her instinct to scan every room she entered, still carrying herself as if the holster was by her side. This behavior extended to checking every mirror and flinching at loud knocks, illustrating the struggle to unlearn 20 years of enforcing the law. Transitioning from being the enforcer to being pursued was even more challenging to adapt to. It took her 2 months to secure a job in private security at a warehouse near the waterfront, where she found solace during the quiet night shift, appreciating the low-profile nature of the job. The absence of a uniform, questions, or judgment provided her with the anonymity she craved, armed only with keys, a flashlight, and solitude. Sometimes she would contemplate her journey from a position of power to wearing prison stripes, transitioning to probation, and eventually surveilling crates of fish. Despite these changes, she had yet to reunite with her daughter or find the right words to explain her tumultuous path. How do you convey the extent of your self-destruction just to assert your sanity, even when faced with inevitable wrongness? Months after the trial, she received an unsettling text from an unknown number. The message contained a photo of the precinct wall, now adorned with a new mural featuring unfamiliar faces. In the corner, concealed within the shadows, was her silhouette in uniform, transformed into a symbol by an unknown individual. The realization left Karen trembling as she carefully placed her phone down. Subsequently, she attended a neighborhood meeting in a church basement, pondering the unintended consequences of her past actions. In a conversation in the South End, people were discussing safety, trust, and how to collaborate with police without just fearing them. A mysterious woman sat quietly in the back listening, until one woman's words struck a chord with her. "It's not that we don't want police," the woman said calmly. "We just want ones who speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable." Karen didn't volunteer or rise to her feet, but she nodded vigorously because that statement hit home. The truth. That was the dividing line, the wound that never fully healed. Karen had acknowledged it too late, burying it under authority and ego for too long. When it eventually emerged, it cut her deeply, Later that evening, she strolled back to her car, passing an elderly man sweeping the sidewalk. "You were her, weren't you?" he asked without looking up. "The one who brought down the chief?" Karen paused but didn't respond. He continued sweeping before saying, "Don't disappear. We still need you." Driving home in silence, she felt a shift within her. She no longer felt invisible or erased. She wasn't the same woman anymore. Not a cop, not a news headline, not a villain. She was simply a survivor with visible wounds that the world had witnessed unfold. For the first time in a while, Karen Blake didn't fear the future. Sometimes it takes losing everything to truly understand what holds value. Karen Blake's narrative isn't just about a corrupt system or a power-hungry individual. It reflects the consequences of pride blinding us, of silence turning into a weapon, and truth arriving too late. Those of us who have lived long enough understand that genuine justice doesn't always originate from the same place. In a courtroom, accountability stems from the courage to acknowledge our mistakes and the resilience to speak up, even when it comes at a cost. This narrative serves as a reminder that integrity may not be flashy or trendy, but it perseveres. It prompts us to ponder if we are using our voices to advocate for justice, even when it's uncomfortable, and if we are truly listening before passing judgment. Despite titles and power fading over time, the impact of our choices and their consequences endures. This tale urges us to reflect on whether we are standing up for what is right, emphasizing that it is never too late to make ethical decisions. Delaying these choices might result in unbearable consequences. If this account resonated with you, show your support by liking and subscribing for more compelling stories. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. We value your perspective.